You've heard of Russian roulette. Slide one bullet into an empty six-shooter, spin the chamber, point it at your head, and pull the trigger. 1 in 6. Not good odds when the cost of losing is so irreversibly final. But those are better odds than you'll get buying a counterfeit painkiller on the streets of Bakersfield if it contains fentanyl. And chances are good it does. Sometimes it seemed like Tyler Cabral could do anything. Anything. Juggling a golf ball and then whacking it in midair, Tiger Woods style. Swishing a basketball from the roof to the driveway below, backward, blind, and one-handed, Harlem Globetrotters style. But Tyler Cabral couldn't manage one challenge. He couldn't beat fentanyl. He told his parents he could. He told his girlfriend he could. He may even have told himself he could. But in the end, on September 9th, 2020, fentanyl won. Before that, though, no challenge seemed too great. Golf, soccer, snowboarding, wakeboarding, motocross, especially motocross. He had that fearlessness that separates the guys in the back of the pack from the ones battling for the lead. And he had 150 motocross trophies to prove it.
Just such a natural at anything he did. The kid was just fearless.
That fearlessness got him in trouble, though. He was hurt so often the injuries sometimes overlapped. He broke his jaw riding a scooter when he was 16, and 2 weeks later, having had most but not all of the wiring removed from his mouth, he entered a motocross race. He crashed again, breaking his femur.
All the little brackets cut his mouth when he fell, and he was bleeding. And I was telling the paramedics, because they pretty much know all the families, and and I was like, oh my God, be careful with his jaw. I go, his jaw's broken. And he looked at me and he goes, how do you know? I said, because he just broke it like less than 2 weeks ago.
Later, Tyler broke his wrist, and later still, he dropped his motorcycle when he slipped on fresh tar while doing another wheelie. More pain, more oxy, deeper dependency. By that time, age 20, he was addicted to painkillers prescribed by various doctors. Once, Cheryl dropped Tyler at a doctor's office, then, without leaving the parking lot, picked up her cell phone.
And I called him and said, look, he's addicted to oxy. You cannot give him anything in that family.
Eventually, his doctors cut him off. So, like many others have done, he turned to the street, where counterfeit oxycodone is inexpensive and abundant, because it's usually not oxycodone at all. It's fentanyl, a cheap synthetic opioid up to 100 times more potent than morphine. Not only is street fentanyl potent and addictive, it's also more dangerous than pharmaceutical opioids because it's not prepared with the same stringent standards used in the industry. Tyler Cabral had made that transition from legitimately purchased opioids, highly dangerous but at least regulated, to the work of criminal amateurs. Tyler couldn't get himself off that either, and then it got scary. Tyler knew he needed help, but he was in the grip of something powerful, something relentless. In early 2020, he overdosed 3 times within just a few days. Each time, his girlfriend Leah recognized his shallow breathing and ran down the hall to wake up Cheryl and Tyler's father Fred. Each time, they brought him back. Each time, until September 9th, 2020. That night, Leah wasn't there. The next morning, she opened his bedroom door with a sense of dread.
I walked over so slow, and I just put my hand on his stomach. And I knew, I could just tell. And I just went, Tyler, and I grabbed his face, and as soon as I grabbed his face, I knew it was too late.
Even just helping one person a day, guys, you don't understand how that could change the world. If everybody helped one person a day, it adds up.
Tyler Cabral must have felt invincible. At times, he seemed invincible to everyone else, too. That's the awful irony of his story. Why are we telling these stories? Because fentanyl, in the same chemical family as opium and heroin, is tearing Kern County families apart. They don't recognize the warning signs, physical and emotional, and they don't grasp the unforgiving finality of a fentanyl overdose. For 17 News, I'm Robert Price.
Fentanyl was a problem before the pandemic.
They're selling death.
Straight fentanyl.
He was laying right there on the bed.
Will they kill you? Sure.
This should not have happened.
And it happened to me.
He was trying to do CPR on him.
We see it more and more.
She was a good kid, but she tried to self-medicate.
There's nothing else you can do, and they said no.
There's ways you can die.
People who are dying from overdoses of fentanyl.
I can't treat you once you're dead. Killing our children.
We have to, as a community, figure this out.
Why is a common question among the parents and family members of people lost to America's illicit drug du jour, the powerful opioid fentanyl. Answers are hard to come by. Harder still is figuring out what to do about it. Carrie Walker is one of those parents. but she has decided on a path forward. Her eldest son, Alexander Cullors, died of an opioid overdose in July 2014 at the age of 18. He'd taken some prescription oxycodone from his girlfriend's grandmother's medicine cabinet.
Rambunctious, crazy, always had a lot of energy, but the most loving kid you've ever met. But like I said, he suffered anxiety, depression, fought that a lot of his life.
Losing a son would devastate any mother. But then in April 2019, Walker's other son, Andrew Cullors, by then 18 himself, died of an overdose too. In his case, fentanyl, counterfeit oxy.
Losing one child to it, your fear of losing another child, I mean, it's just great. So with Andrew, it was like, I educated him. I educated him, and we talked about it. There were times like I caught him smoking pot, and I sat down with him and cried and said, I cannot lose another child. I won't survive it. And I would never try opiates. I would never try those. I know what they have to do.
Then one night, he didn't come home. His friend found him in his car in Arvin, where he'd been parked at a gas station for 2 days, somehow undetected. Walker seized upon the only survival strategy she could think of, educating others. She has started a nonprofit called Steps of Change, a Facebook-based organization that has morphed from the school assembly speech circuit into what she thinks it really needs to be, a place for referrals, support, networking.
I don't know how many times I hear you're strong, it's amazing what you do, you're going to touch lives, you're going to change lives, you're going to do amazing things.
Are you strong?
No. That's the easy thing to say, the easy for them to say, because what else are you going to say? You lost 2 children, what do they say to you, There's nothing you can say, but you're so strong, And I do what I do, anger, a lot of it, there's different emotions in it, but a lot of it's anger. It's like, our children, it's killing our children.
But she found strength in the strength of others like Louis Wright, a one-time heroin addict turned minister. He runs One Door Recovery, one of the very few, now perhaps the only, opioid detox centers in Bakersfield. And he's seeing something now in the rising threat of fentanyl he hasn't seen before. Fentanyl is showing up in everything, including non-opiates.
A lot of the fentanyl that's coming in is coming in, Asia, the cartel, Mexico, and it's a lot cheaper for them to use fentanyl than it is to go through, the opium, the harvesting, all the stuff that goes into it. It's pretty rare to find, heroin today that's truly heroin.
Since becoming a minister nearly a decade ago, Wright has presided over dozens of funerals, and only one of them, he said, was for a natural causes death. The rest have been drug-related.
This is the problem that we're seeing. Methamphetamine, cocaine, will they kill you? Sure. Heroin today, it's gonna kill you. It's like Russian roulette every time you use it.
Thanks to the pervasive presence of fentanyl, the fear of instant death now applies to every drug on the street.
Fentanyl's a really, really high.
Inside a small downtown Bakersfield sandwich shop, I sat across the table from a drug addict, a user of crystal meth. That's a non-opioid stimulant. We used a special test strip to determine whether fentanyl was present in the dose he was preparing to inject. 2 red lines means no fentanyl detected. 1 red line means it's there.
That says it is fentanyl.
This addict said he would shoot up his full regular dose anyway. He would just, as advised, make sure he had a friend with him and a dose of the opioid overdose antidote, Narcan, close at hand. There's not enough Narcan to go around, common though it might be now. America will knock back this fentanyl crisis only with education and reasoned, thoughtful enforcement.
The person who actually sells.
John Hart of Bakersfield, who lost 2 nephews, Dylan and Cameron Hart, just 9 months apart last year, says legislation that increases penalties for street dealers is a big part of the answer.
What I'm urging my brother and the group that he's involved with to do is, instead of trying to pressure the police, whose hands are tied by the existing laws, to direct their efforts at the state legislature and see if we can get ourselves to the point where they can toughen up those laws so that not only the big dealers pay the price, but also the street dealers.
Kern County District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer notes that fentanyl overdose deaths in 2020 nearly equaled the record number of local homicides last year, 140. And she agrees. State sentencing laws need to be toughened up. But she also says parents must be made aware of the danger, and she aims to do that.
Well, when kids come back to school in the fall, because they're at home now, we want to do a push to make sure parents know about fentanyl. Sometimes kids think they're buying ecstasy or Xanax or some of the other drugs, and it's not. It's fentanyl. And so it can be very, very deadly.
Legislation was, in fact, in the pipeline, but it took a different tack. State Senator Melissa Melendez, a Republican from Riverside County, tried to push through a bill this spring that would treat repeat fentanyl dealers who kill like repeat DUI drivers who kill. It failed, but she's not giving up on the issue.
We are considering options because obviously we didn't have much success in the committee hearing. So there is an option of doing a ballot measure, perhaps where we would let the voters decide if this is how they want to handle this. We haven't made a decision yet, but we're looking because it's that important. There's too many people. We had over 2 hours of testimony of people who had lost a loved one from this drug, and I just can't, in good conscience, stand by and just do nothing.
And now, as deadly as fentanyl has proven to be, a more deadly chemical cousin looms on the horizon. Carfentanil, a structural analog of fentanyl, is starting to show up in street drugs, and it's 100 times more likely to kill than fentanyl. Carfentanil has only 2 legitimate applications: as a tranquilizing agent for elephants, and theoretically in military operations. Banned under the International Chemical Weapons Convention, carfentanil was used most infamously during the 2002 Moscow Opera House hostage crisis, when Chechen rebels seized the packed Dubrovka Theater. The Russian military, in an attempt to incapacitate the 40 terrorists, pumped in aerosolized carfentanil. It killed 120 of the 850 Russian hostages. Some have likened its potency to nerve gas. And now it's coming to the streets of Bakersfield, disguised cruelly again as oxycodone. Hillcrest Cemetery has a special significance for Carrie Walker. Her boys are here, Alex and Andrew, born 7 years apart, but 18 now, both of them, forever, buried in the same plot, having suffered the same fate. A fate that might not have befallen them if not for a man-made pandemic built on profit, addiction, and deception. That's why we're telling these stories, because fentanyl is not an ordinary drug. It is not the sort of manageable high your son or daughter might think it is, in part because they may not even know what they're taking. We're telling these stories so families can talk to each other about the reality of fentanyl, about the finality of fentanyl, now, while it's still possible to have those conversations. The lethal synthetic cousin of prescription opioids that continues to make its presence known in cemeteries across the land, fentanyl, is not slowing. It's gaining momentum, even morphing into forms more diabolical yet. And unless some combination of education, legislation, and communication takes hold soon, the coronavirus outbreak will not be the only health tragedy of this moment in time that we'll look back on a generation from now with dismay and regret. For 17 News, I'm Robert Price.